Join us for another episode where real men have real conversations about leadership, relationship, morality, and dominion. Welcome to Mancode.
Well, hello, viewing audience, Mancode audience. We'd like to welcome you back for another great conversation. We're back with episode 5 today. Today, we're actually going to be discussing fixing the broken family. If you've tuned into any of our Mancode podcasts, you always know we have dynamic conversation. It's always roundtable and it's always fluent. And we want you to chime in, join in as well. So as you're viewing the video, definitely comment on whatever you think may be pertinent to you. Like it, subscribe, and share it. Because again, the Mancode conversation can be had everywhere with anybody, anytime. But today I'm excited because we have some guests with us today that are really gentlemen that are more expertly lined up with our topic today. But you know, I'm Jonathan Russell, Mancode moderator. I like to go around and let everybody introduce themselves. So gentlemen, let's kick it off.
Malcolm Crawford, good morning.
Danielle Lewis, welcome back.
Derek Miller.
Emil Washburn.
Right. Well, I'd like to thank our special guests, Derek and Vermeil, for joining us today. If you gentlemen wouldn't mind, tell us a little bit about yourselves and why we actually chose you to converse this with us today. Either one of you can start.
All right, I'll start. Derek Miller, creative director with the Fatherhood Network. Been with the Fatherhood Network 6 years now. Active here in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And, you know, we work with fathers and families throughout, try to knock down barriers.
Ramil Washburn, director of e-commerce and NFT creator for the Fatherhood Network. Pretty much piggybacking off of what Derek said, the objective is to just help families by helping the father. So,
love it, love it. You know, I love that because you look at the dynamic of family, and when you think of how God structured family, it's him, father, mother, children. That's family right there. So I love that you guys are gearing toward men because that's what we need to get our men strong and encouraged to continue to be fathers. But as we kind of dig into this a little bit, and in thinking of family, and I know every family is different, every dynamic is different, but looking generally, how has the dynamic changed from the traditional family structure? As far as from our observation view, anybody can go. Chop this up.
Well, I'll go ahead.
Go ahead, Pastor Malcolm.
Yeah, thank you. I'm thinking if you define traditional, Brother Jonathan kind of touched on it. He says mother, father, to children and so forth. If that's what we're defining as traditional, like you say, hey, yeah, it's definitely it's changed quite a bit. It's evolved quite a bit, because even the last 100 years, you have the nuclear family, you have the grandparent family, you have the stepchildren family, the blended family, all those types of things. So it's definitely changed. Not really nothing new. I would say and these new gentlemen that are on, they might give you some more better statistics, but I would say in the last 30, 40, 50 years, it's changed dramatically because of, you go into the different types, same-sex relationships and all that. That wasn't as prevalent, 75 years ago, 50 years ago. But so, yeah, the dynamics are changing quite a bit. And with that, I'm sure we'll discuss some of these things. It brings a different set of challenges and so forth. But yeah, so from the traditional, it's still there in a lot of cases. And many of you may have been raised in a traditional home, mother, father in the home, and siblings and so forth without biological, your natural brothers and sisters and so forth. So yeah, it's changed quite a bit, but we'll discuss this a little bit.
Yeah, what I was getting ready to say is that culturally and historically, the family dynamic basically changed, and you can fact check this either after World War I or World War II, when women actually went into the workforce because their husbands were out at war, and women began to work in the factories, government jobs, building planes, and working in the factories. And so they became breadwinners for their families while their husbands were at war. That dynamic stayed that way once they came back, because these ladies have found a sense of independence and empowerment, being able to make their own money, which kind of changed the dynamic of the family structure. You want to look at governmentally within certain cultural groups, general assistance changed the dynamic for families and homes, because you could not get general assistance if the father was in the home. And so caseworkers were actually put into place in order to make sure that the fathers were not in the home. And so the fathers would stay away from the home, but try to raise their kids from that family structure. And so you just keep adding different dynamics, and all of these dynamics over the course of the years have changed the culture of that dynamic of having a holistic, family of father, mother, children.
Wow. Real or Derek, y'all chime in on this one.
Yeah, really to add to what Brother Danielle was saying, yeah, a lot of stuff did change around that World War II phase. Women started getting jobs, being able to hold down the household and everything by themselves, and having that income. What you also see now, you see the idea of the traditional family is still there. There are still people who believe in that, but when you see the dynamics of how everything is now, it kind of shows that the roles that people kind of fall into or assign to themselves or others have changed. So traditionally, you will see the man is a breadwinner. He's got to go out and work, and mom stay at home. With that change of women gaining more independence, getting jobs, they're able to get that money now. But now you see women are excelling in the career field, in education. They're often more educated than men. And you, depending on, what area that you might see, the women might be the only one working inside the house. And you see a lot of dads kind of pulling back and staying inside the home to raise children. So you can see these kind of roles are flipped from the traditional model. Not to say that it's wrong for a man to stay home and be with his kids. There's nothing wrong with that. That's fantastic. But when you see just what things are now in comparison to that traditional model, it's a huge change.
Yeah.
Yeah, building off of that, I appreciate the fact that the brother earlier spoke about the implementation of getting the fathers out of the home. I think that a lot of people, when speaking on relationships in general, kind of miss or don't even include that to bring context to the conversation. But yeah, I think that was definitely a starting point where you see a dramatic change in the dynamic of the household between the man and the woman, based off of the system where she would receive benefits if the man is not in the home. And there's even cases where social workers will go in the home to make sure that there was no man clothing, deodorant, anything that a man would need, shaving cream, anything that would signify that a man is occupying the home. So I think that was the precursor to what we're seeing today. And I think that we are, as a community, we're constantly reacting to things that are brought to our attention versus being organized from the jump to combat whatever we're faced with.
Very good. If I could ask Danielle for a question. He might can give me more information on this. I know you say after World War maybe II, the culture changed. Did this affect the African American culture? Because most of the documents and reels I look at, I know how the Caucasian women went in the factory, but how did it affect the African American community? Or did they also go into the factory? Did that change that dynamic? Or what's your thoughts on that?
So just historically, you know that everything was not on the same level playing field. There were a lot of things promised to, like the GI Bill and stuff like that, that African Americans tried to capitalize on, even as far as even home ownership, that I was actually offered to military officers who actually served. And so I think by and large, I think African Americans have always held to the sense of family. I think to that construct that the male is basically the breadwinner and he provides for his family and his children. I think a good movie, what was the movie with Fences? I think is a great visual example of the struggle of an African American father and the struggles and the dynamics within inside of his family. You know what I'm saying? And so I look at, again, there's a lot of different dynamics. I think the war did do that. I mean, because once again, African American women did have to go and work, but they were already working. They were already working as, housekeepers and things like that in order to bring, we've never been as culturally, we've never been a one income family dwelling. It's always has taken the collective in order to manage an African American home. So to that point, Pastor Malcolm, the differences are startling because there's not that dichotomy of equality across the board when you speak to those same things. There's a difference.
Gotcha. Appreciate that.
You gentlemen really came armed today. I love this. I'm just gonna say, to cap it off, when you look at traditional family, you look at the way something is designed to be versus how it operates. You take a car, you can take one of the wheels off of a car and drive it with 3 wheels, and you'll get around, but you won't get there the way that it was intended to be. And I think that's the same way with the family. There's nothing spoken against single moms or single parents, but the fact is, when you take away the design of something, it doesn't operate the way it needs to be. It's not at its fullest. But we threw out, Pastor Mike, you threw out something about statistics, and I want to bring this up because today in the US, married couples reflect less than 48% of households. And we're talking households with children. Now, does this have a bad impact on our kids and what kind of future they have?
Can I jump in on that?
Please.
Yeah. When the father or a positive male role model is not inside the picture, you see a rise in infant mortality rates. That is the rate that children die before they reach the age of 1. You see an increase in poverty. You see increase in abuse. You see a decrease in emotional regulation in children, and it leads to a host of other problems. But at the same time, the other side of that coin, when a positive male role model or father is inside the picture, you see almost any risk you can think of, get cut almost in half, if not by more.
Right.
Simply by your presence being there, by you filling that role. So yes, it has a huge impact on a child from birth. This isn't something that, you have to wait years and years to see the results of that. No, you can see the results of a father being there or not from a child's earliest months of age. You can see it. Because when fathers parent traditionally, I mean, this is more of a blanket statement, but you just have a different way of going about it. Statistically, fathers are more likely to encourage independence in their kids. And that can go from even the way that you hold a child. So a father is more likely to hold a child facing outward. So looking forward into the world, where a mom might have the child facing towards her. So there are very little things, and I'm not saying that every single person does this, no. But when you look at just some of the statistics of it, it's just more likely that men will do that. And then that encourages independence, that encourages them to go out and figure things out in the world by themselves. That makes sense?
Well said.
Love that.
I would just add to what you said, Derek, and just say this, that presence isn't present. And so it's important that men know that just because you are present physically in that space doesn't mean that you are present, actively engaging in the life of that particular child. And so it's important that we are present, actively engaging in the life of the child. That will help move, not just present, sitting on the couch, playing video games, or present, you know, drinking beer, or present. That presence is not doing anything to help move anything anywhere. So
thank you for clearing that up for me. Yeah.
That's real good. I agree with both you gentlemen, and it does make a big difference, like you say. I love what Danielle said about, you know, being there and having making an impact. But we do know that, you know, if I love the statistics too that Brother Derek shared, because yeah, if the man's not there, it's going to be a difference. But at the end of the day, short answer, I would say it's going to make an impact. But with all that being said, people can still thrive if that person gets a connection, or if that mother is strong. And doesn't mean it's going to be it's going to all end bad, but you know, it's going to be more challenging, it's going to be more difficult, but it can, you know, there can be a lot of hope and a lot of wins for that particular family. But yeah, I agree with everything that you guys said.
Got on that, Ramil?
As far as the stats, Derek literally took the majority of what I was going to say. But yeah, so when the father is not present and actively engaging and playing his role as leader, there are definitely more obstacles that children, that household in general will normally encounter. And just like the pastor said, it's not saying that it is impossible, but you increase the likelihood of more hurdles to jump. And it's just more beneficial when, you know, the father is, you know, playing his role, being active. We know there's things that happens that prevents that. You know, there's a plethora of situations, but generally speaking, when the dad is not present and being active and doing his part, there are more barriers, there's more obstacles, there's, you know, you have more things down the road to kind of, you know, look for, and there are a lot of things that you might not see.
Great answer, gentlemen. Great, because the way I see it, you always have to look at your role as a man, a husband, and a father as one of leadership. So if you don't have anything to let the children be led by, that right there leaves a gap. And then you look at the dynamic of family, how they see that. You know, if I don't grow up seeing my mother and my father living as husband and wife, then that's not an objective that I'm shooting for, because that's not really reality to me. I can go out, I can have kids without the sanctity of marriage. I can have a family, you know, we just living together. So the ideal is actually ruined when you actually don't have that imagery in front. And you look at the fact that the father really is a protector and leader and guide. So when you, and I'm not saying the mothers can't do that, don't get me wrong, but the way that God designed it, that's our role. So we take that away, we take away the security of those children. They don't feel as safe. And you have to understand one thing about babies, and I'm sure you guys can agree, they feel their feelings are on high alert. So they feel when the mom is struggling, stressed, trying to keep everything together, trying to run that house. That affects the whole family, you know, whether it be both parents there or not. So we just have to understand that the example that we set from jump, that will play out for life. So y'all tackled that extremely well. I love this. But keeping on the men here, we play a large role in why families are the force that it should be, or even when it shouldn't be. But how has, and we tapped on this a little bit, but I really want us to dig deeper. How has society's current ideals affected us in the role we play?
Well, for
Go ahead,
one,
Jimmy.
oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. I want to hear from you.
Okay. Well, there are a lot of messages that are being thrown at men and fathers by society. There are messages that one really says that I don't need you. And you know, that there's independence, but then there's, you know, just the straight up, I don't need you. What do I need you for outside of, to put it blunt, to make babies? So that's one message. But then to add to the message of I don't need you is, and it's similar, but it's a little different. You're not important. And this can be seen as early as when a couple is pregnant, they're going to the hospital. All questions, everything is directed at mom. Dad is left sitting in the corner. They don't ask them any questions. Anything goes on, they go to mom. Something going on in the school, traditionally, they're going to call mom. So they might have knowledge that a father is there, but through their actions, they're saying that he's not important. And you also have the message where really, man, you can be in the household, but you don't have to do anything. You're the man in the house simply because you're in the house. So do you have some men out there that could be at home playing video games and really just not contributing to that household, not truly being present, as we defined earlier. But I mean, they're living the life. You don't have to do anything, but you can reap the benefits. Mm-hmm. So there are a lot of messages out there that society is throwing at men. You know, what do you guys think?
I just wanted to touch real quick, man, on what you initially started off with, and that was the statements of not being needed or not being of value. And so I think there's some onus that needs to come with statements. It's like when a woman says, you know, I'm tired of you, you know, it's not the fact that she's tired of you. She still loves you. What she's tired of is unfulfilled promises that have been spoken to her by you. And she can't take or stomach any more lies because she has bought into what you have promised. You overpromised and underdelivered. And so I think over time, because of those particular types of dynamics, and being jilted, hurted, or basically adopting the offense of someone else, because we may have all been around situations where a young lady may have been in a bad relationship with someone, and now that person who hurt her now is villainized, and everybody in her camp is against that person. They didn't do anything to all those people, but those people have taken on that offense because you've hurt somebody that is loved. When you have those dynamics and you're raising kids and you're raising young ladies, you're basically transferring that from generation to generation, where it actually becomes a norm. An offense can become a norm just by people continually fostering it through generations. So I'm a single mother. I have daughters. They hear me talk bad about their fathers. They get in relationships. They find somebody that loves them, but as soon as they see things that their father did or that they heard their mother say that they did, they put them in that box. That's why men become exceptions and not the case. It was like, well, you're an exception, but you're an exception. Like, no, maybe you met the exceptions, but we're really the case. This is really what masculinity and manhood actually is. And what you met was an exception. Those men were outside, the outliers. They were the ones outside of the scope of how you are experiencing. But when you are reaching into the same pools, you are experiencing the same type of individuals, you think your whole world is colored that same way. And so I think in some aspects it helps for real men to step up, like your fatherhood network, for real men to step up, for real men to show, you know, that they're taking care of families, to change, to take hold of the narrative and to reestablish what it actually is because we know just from generations, like Father's Day came, nobody gets excited about fathers don't even get excited about Father's Day. Real talk. Come on now. You know what I'm saying? You know, to us it's like, oh yeah, it's another day. What you gonna do? Well, I'm probably gonna grill. I'm probably gonna do this. I'm probably gonna do that. It's supposed to be a day celebrating me, but I'm gonna be doing a whole lot on that day. Mother's Day, oh no, we're taking her out. We're going to do this. We're going to do that for her. You know, and so when you see the dynamics and you see kind of how certain messaging is always like portrayed and pushed forward, you know, even if I'm not a skillsman, somebody's going to buy me a tool set. Even if I was a musician, somebody gonna give daddy a tool set. They're gonna give him a screwdriver, a wrench, or something. You know what I'm saying? You know, because in their head they think father is associated with skills, work with their hand. And so I'm saying all that basically to say is that I think that some of the onus of why people have that perception is based off of the point that we were talking about as far as what am I doing in order to perpetuate or to destroy the narrative that's out there as far as masculinity and manhood and fatherhood is concerned.
Wow, man, I really like that. And I like the question is a great question here. And when you talk about how has society's ideals affected us, when I hear the word societies, I'm going to interject the word world in there, or the word cosmos, that type of thing. How has the world's thinking? Pastor Brooks talked about this, how the world's thinking is so off. And behind this, there's really a spiritual force. The enemy is trying to destroy everything that he can that's good. He comes to kill, steal, destroy. So he knows that whatever system that he can put in place, you know, through the government, however, whatever he can use to, in a sense, as the old saying is, keep the man down. Even though we know that you really can't keep the man down, but they do try to provide those types of things, those ideals, those pictures and images and so forth, and to even get you thinking that, hey, that I'm not important. Hey, I can just break wide. You know, she don't need me. Like you say, the women, they have some hurts and they think, oh, I don't need a man. And we buy into that sometimes. But I don't believe that if you know who you are and yeah, you can stand tall. I like the idea, even with me, with Father's Day, Danielle is absolutely correct. It doesn't get the play in that I think it should. But like I tell my children, hey, I don't need a whole lot. I just need 2 phone calls, one on Father's Day and one on my birthday. Once you do that, I'm good. You know, you don't have to buy me a tie or some socks, but I want to call, you see, so that, and I can work with that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I love that you guys are giving some great information. I'm actually getting a lot from this conversation.
Taking notes. What about you, Ramil?
I was gonna say that I think we as a community we don't have a solid understanding of how powerful propaganda is. And a lot of times people take it as something that is obsolete or something that doesn't work anymore. But it's so fascinating when you think about it, the amount of effort that it takes and the amount of money that it takes to try and change the way that a group of people think and operate. And I think that as it relates to what the message is about fatherhood or the implementation of fatherhood or father's presence, is very watered down. And there's a promotion that, and not saying that it's a bad thing, but the if if children can grow up in a two-parent household, that is the most advantageous situation for children. Now, if a child is, child or children growing up in single parent homes, which is cool, because there are a lot of successful people that come from that situation, but it is not the ideal predicament or atmosphere for the development of a child. And we seem to have been normalized to this idea. And then when we are exposed to the other side, the underbelly of what that does to children, we are taught to encourage that behavior as if it's some kind of strength when it's trauma, and then reward the trauma in certain ways, not necessarily monetarily, but maybe attention, or maybe, but not necessarily trying to fix the problem or fix the cycle. I just think that the more the more attention we give to paying, like paying attention to how these things, like, well, for example, like certain TV shows, you see certain TV shows, or there are certain movies. I know that I have a particular mindset, and I operate a certain way. But I also know if I watch something too much, my subconscious will swallow something, and I'm going to pick up something that I had no idea about until it's too late. And now I have to work backwards, retrogress, to get it out of my system. So I think that the being very mindful of our surroundings, what we are paying attention to, everything doesn't deserve our energy. There's things that come and go, that come, and that we should let go. A lot of times we are very anxious and sometimes almost ambivalent to be super responsive and emotional when things pop up that we see that may be out of hand, and that we could easily if we just avoid it, it will be a non-factor in our lives, or in our way of thinking. But when we engage it is when we start to lose.
Great point. Because you really get something there, and I think of entertainment, and I'm gonna be quick on this, but you see the image of fathers is clumsy, is not together, is needing more assistance from the wife, who's normally the sharper one, or the dad's kind of a bumbler, so the kids step in. So when you give the imagery of that being a weaker role, it's definitely not going to be something that's embraced. And I think that's definitely a purposeful spiritual attack. But let me dive into this. How challenging is it for us as parents now to keep our role as first teacher to our kids? Because I think that's becoming hard.
Well,
Um,
go ahead. Go ahead, right there. Let me hear from a young parent. Yeah, let me hear from what you got to say.
okay. I'll say that I can't really say that it's a challenge to be the first teacher. I think that it is a challenge for us to accept it, because we're teaching them regardless of if we're teaching them. Okay. Our kids are watching us do whatever we do, and that's going to be their lesson. But what I like to do, and I like to call it the law first. So when you said the first teacher, it reminds me of that. So the law first is you will compare any piece of information that you learn to the first thing you learned about it. So, and I like this example. Let's say your son or daughter goes to school and hear from one kid out there that cars run off of glue. Now they say, well, that's not what my dad said. My dad said cars run off of gas. So any piece of information, they're going to compare it to the first thing they learned about that subject. And I think that for us, the real challenge comes down to we might get so caught up in everything that's going on that we are letting the environment teach our kids instead of us teaching them directly. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So that can be like, okay, you're tired from work, so you sit down. Kid tries to engage you, you don't engage, you turn on the TV. So what you're doing there is you're allowing the TV to raise them. You're letting the TV give them the information that they need. Now, another thing that people need to realize is that teaching isn't like you standing up and you have some lesson plan and things like that. You don't have to have a profound life lesson for every single moment. A child just wants your time. So as you're there and you're engaging with them, they are learning. Anything that you say, like we all have our little sayings that we say all the time, whether it be measure twice. One thing my dad always said, measure twice, cut once. It didn't matter if we were cutting wood. He would say measure twice, cut once. But the lesson there was to measure out what you're doing, fully assess what you need to do twice before you act. So I learned the lesson from him repeating it and giving me the context in which to use it. So when we are their first teachers, it can come from our everyday moments. So I want people to really, wrap their heads around that and accept that. But I think when it comes to us really doing it, it's really getting outside of ourselves and how we feel about something to really pour into and engage a child and family in the way that they need to be engaged in. Feel like I rambled a little bit, but I hope that you got what I was trying to say.
No, I'm tracking.
Yeah.
Really put.
Good, man. I like that. If I can just say this, I like what you said about the law first. When I think about this too, I think of it like ducks and so forth. It's like imprinting. The first thing that they see, they're going to look at that. It's going to have a strong influence on them. Doesn't mean that it can't be broken. But that's the good thing about the spirit, because you see, you can go, if you're a spiritual person, and with that being said, a man or woman that's God per se, they can go into the spirit and so forth and break certain things. But that's why I'm saying too, you don't have to have, the society is trying to become that first teacher. But if you raise your parents, if you raise your kids right, you can come against that. I was going to say also, the dominant spirit rules. The dominant spirit always rule, because, for example, if we were in this particular group and we just started talking about something, whoever has the dominant spirit is probably going to control most of the things. You're not trying to be here all that takeover type stuff. But in most things, the dominant spirit that's is active is going to rule. So if you know what you're placing in your son, your daughter, whatever, and let them know, hey, as Derek was saying, that good teaching, that good instrument. Hey, son, hey, daughter, you're going to have a lot of things that are going to be pulled for your attention. That's going to try to get you away from me. But if you lay those foundations, that good, those good values, those good morals, hey, this is what we stand for. Even though they go out against that obstacles, you cover them in prayer and so forth. You can combat all those negative forces that are trying to pull them by for their attention, even though they are very strong. Because I like what he said about the first thing. The first thing that you see is very strong. Because I think back to my first teachers, a lot of them had an impact on me, whether it was positive or negative. Hopefully it was an affirmative, especially if you don't have a male father figure at the house and you had a man that came to you and stepped into that gap, fill that gap. It makes a big difference. You see, I know I had a lot of influences that were first, and they weren't always on the positive side, and it really shaped me until I came into some truth, came into some light. I had to repel that darkness that I was taught, but yeah, first is powerful. That's a good principle there, yeah, for sure. Talks about that too in the Bible. Talks about the first mention and all those types of things, but I'm not gonna go there with that.
So I just wanted to add to what Derek was saying earlier, and just add this. I think we need to be intentional about our messaging. I think we if we understand those who are learned or educated in child development, your child basically has certain key times throughout their growth and development where you can introduce certain information that can help build them foundationally and what they actually know. So we all know that at some point you got to have a sex talk with your kids. That's one thing that how are you going to have that talk? What information are you going to get to them? Talking to your kids about what a family structure is. At some point, you need to have a conversation about what family structure is so that the world doesn't be the dictator on what family structure is for your children. Your first mention again. So there should be actually some key things that are your first mentions to your children so they can wait. What's a relationship? People are getting in and out of relationships, but they don't know the difference between a friend, an associate, an acquaintance. They may not even heard those terms nor the classifications to know. So everybody is a friend. Oh, that's my friend. No, that's not your friend. That's an acquaintance. How, so knowing the dynamics of how to navigate themselves in the world that you have introduced them into. I think there should be some key things that we imprint in our children so that they have something they can refer to. I tell our pastor often, I was like, you gave me a toolbox, of things to help me build and grow myself into a man. I can go back and I can pull lessons that were taught that help me frame the world that I lived in. Like, for instance, people voting for a particular party just simply because it's culturally a norm for people to vote a certain particular way. Not voting towards what your belief factor is, not voting towards what you believe as an individual, what you stand for as an individual, and what their platform is. Does it align? Am I not a factor? I'm only a factor just based on my skin color and and my persuasion. I'm saying, no, there's more to me than that. And I began to think for the first time. It was like, instead of just going straight ticket, it was like, well, there's some things I don't even agree with in that particular party, and so I vote for this and I vote for this and I vote for this because now I'm thinking, because now I've been given some tools that I should be processing the world that's around me. And so I think our kids should be the same thing. I think we should be intentional, again, about key things we want to imprint our children. I think that's where legacy and transitional wealth and transitional things that you want to pass on from generation to generations, that whole, measure twice, cut once, philosophy, I'm hearing you share that, but I had I had basically just check it twice before I do it once. But, hearing you, it was more substantial, what I'm saying, weigh it out, the whole thing, whole matter out, and then come back and weigh it out again. Maybe I should be doing that. What I'm saying? So my point basically is that I think it's just be some intentional things that we should introduce to our children. So again, your first mention piece can be a solid, more substantial life-giving component to our children. Sorry, I took longer than I wanted to.
Good. What's your take on that, Ramil?
For me personally, a couple of the things that I have done with my daughters, I have two daughters, 5 and 3. Since they were younger, just the implementation of, we would listen to classical. We still listen to classical music. I play classical music for them all the time. I keep, we have things on the walls everywhere. We have a periodic table. We have division, multiplication. We have things of encouragement. And I think that definitely being first and being intentional, and also being being that example. Because a lot of times parents attempt to teach their children something that they aren't doing themselves. And children learn mostly what they see, not what they hear normally. And so I you know, I always go in with the model to just be um a force in that realm of them, of that educational area, be it formal or outside of the school, life skills. So I think that sometimes if you're you know, if you're not intentional about if you're not intentional and consistent about whatever program you would want your child to buy into, society will have something for them if you don't.
Consistency is key. And that's the thing. It's not so much do as I say and not as I do. But we gotta walk the walk that we talk. So I love that. Y'all gentlemen hitting it. But while we're on the line of teaching, our education system touts alternative lifestyles, sexual orientation, and a bias toward God. So how can parents who see the wrong in this fight it?
Man, I you know what, and this is one of the questions that I read that I was like, because when my uh oldest daughter first started school, I was intentional about getting a curriculum, reading the curriculum, going over the books that they were going to read, getting reviews, looking at the books. If there was something that I did not want her to partake in, I would um, email her teacher, email her principal, let them know I want her to be excluded out of that lesson. Um, and I think that if, I think I think a lot of times parents are waiting for the school to teach their children something that they don't want them to know, just so they can react, versus being proactive. And I think that, your best course of action is just to be ahead, So I just had the idea, because I remember at the time, I think in Texas and California, they had like some questionable curriculums for children, especially young children. So I came up with the idea. I contacted the KPS building, and I just wanted a copy of all the curriculum. I wanted to see all the books so I can research the books. If I did not agree with the book, I know one book in particular last year, it was a book about painting, I think George Washington in a positive light. And I made sure to send an email to the teacher and the principal of her school. I don't want her reading that book, or I don't want her participating in this. I don't want her saying the national anthem, or I don't want her, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think that parents should be, mothers and fathers should be more intentional about the educational process versus being reactionary when the child comes home with some sort of knowledge that they didn't want them to pick up. Like, I just think that, completely relying on the educational system to teach your child without your input is backwards completely.
If I can go, Derek, I mean, not Derek, but Romeo, you make some excellent points. I was a former teacher for about 34 years. And like I say, the education system has really evolved and changed over those 34 years. You guys probably can remember some stuff that we started with, the racial stuff, as far as the stereotypes, or, the male in the home. We had stuff like Sambo was in the curriculum and all that type of stuff, and it was crazy. But you're absolutely right, though. I would just say parents need to become more involved. And I have really been listening to what Pastor Brooks has said about the educational system and really trying to get the broad perspective of it. But he made a statement, and it's so true, because that's a system, and they are trying to take God out of it. So therefore, we know that with anything without God, we know ultimately it's going to have some trouble. I'm not going to say it's going to fail, but it's not going to become all that it was supposed to be. But I think in most cases, like I say, most parents, sounds like I was listening to you, I was thinking, man, if Brother Romero was in my class, man, his kid might be there for like out of a 6-hour day, he might be in there for about 2 hours, because, man, all that stuff, the curriculum they give you, man, you can't hear this, you can't hear this, you can't hear this. But I'm not going to teach, fallacies like George Washington was a great man, because I'm going to teach truth. Let's say we have to teach it. I'm just going to say I'm not going to go that direction. But I hear what you're saying, though. So I would just say, short answer: become informed, become involved, get on boards, and so forth. And at the end of the day, just be active, like I say, in your child's life. And if they come home with this stuff that you don't agree with, get with the people that maybe can make some changes, and just tell your child, hey, we don't believe this, and explain to him or her, what we see as truth.
Who else wants to chop in on this?
I'll jump in on that. One, I completely agree with both Ramil and Brother Malcolm. If you don't agree with the stuff, you have to get involved with it. That you got to be in the room. If you are silently complaining at home and you don't step forward or do anything about it, nothing changes. So you have to either join the board, at least voice your opinion on something, have a chance to be able to change something, or take steps like Ramil, where you are speaking to the teachers, you're speaking to the principal, and you're going over the curriculum to really screen it for the things that are a hindrance to your family and your belief system. You have to take an active and engaged role. It can't be something that is just, I'll handle it when it happens type deal. You have to, like, returning to that law of first, you have to give your kids the tools to navigate this world without you. Because honestly, how many hours does the school have your kid compared to you in a day? You wake up, you get them ready for school. What? That's 1-2 hours. They're in school for, I don't even know what, 8 hours. You come home, you come home and you might have dinner, you get them ready for bed, and then you go to bed. You might have them for maybe 4 or 5 hours out of 24-hour period. You have to be engaged in that amount of time that you got. Can't zone out.
Be there. Hey, you got anything you want to hit on this?
No, I think we covered it, man.
No. I'm just gonna say in short, y'all have all been very much on point with everything you said. And I just look at it like this, and men will know what I'm talking about, but I just say this to all parents. Don't be the armchair quarterback of your kids' lives watching it play out in front of you. Be a coach on the field. Y'all know exactly where I'm going with that. Get involved, stay involved, because it's their future and your legacy at stake. But I'm gonna tell y'all, this has been a great topic to dive into, and it's kind of been so deep. We're gonna have to come back with a part 2 on this, because I just think we just kind of scratched part of the surface where we need to go. So if my guests Derek and Ramil would not mind, we want to have y'all back, because again, the Mancode conversation needs to keep going. So we're gonna keep this conversation fluid among us. But to the viewers out there, we want to thank y'all for joining us. Again, we love chopping it up with you. We want to hear your comments on this. So definitely throw it at us. We want to hear what you think. Because again, this is something that we discuss with you. It's not just us being talking heads coming at y'all. So until we come back, stay tuned. We will drop announcements when we'll be back again very soon. Subscribe in the meantime, like the channel, share it out, and definitely give us your comments, give us your thoughts, because we got to keep this going. We're trying to change the world and impact it in a positive way, and you are definitely a part of what we're doing. But again, as I always say, until the next time, keep the man code, and we'll see y'all soon.